There we go. Hi.
Okay, we found each other. That introduction was probably the best one that I've ever seen, so I should probably be late more often. Oh my God.
I was just
Thank
like
you for having me.
rambling on and on about your book. So
Pretty much how I write a book, rambling on and on.
not to suggest the book was a ramble. I'm just saying, there's so much in it. It was so great. It was so, I said multifaceted. I should have said like just so textural. There's so many different elements to it. So,
Debbie, thank you. Thank you so much. That book was my life for a year. I've heard a statistic that the average woman speaks 30,000 words a day. And I always think I should just, be able to talk for 3 days and write a book, but it doesn't really work like that way. So thank you for appreciating that.
well, tell me about, so you've written 50 novels. That's insane.
Yeah.
Over how many years have you written 50 novels? That's just the most inspirational thing.
Is it really? I hope so. Either that or, I have no life. No, I published my first book in 1987. It was a historical romance, a cowboy romance, and came out in 1987 when I was in my 20s, and I've published a book or two ever since. So yeah, it's been my life. I was a teacher. I loved being a teacher. It was, my second favorite career, I guess, but the writing eventually took over. And then this one, The Lost and Found Bookshop, it's the 50-somethingth novel, but I kind of lost count.
Wow.
Cool. Yes. And thank you so much for having me. And thanks for your patience waiting for me to go live with you. This is my first time to go live.
Oh my God. This kept happening. I did this show during the quarantine the first couple months, and I would say like half the people had not done a show before. So, I'm happy to be the one ushering in this new technology. So Susan, you've written 50 plus books. How did you come up with the idea for this? I know you kind of alluded to some things in your acknowledgments about who may have helped you come up with it, but tell me the whole story.
Well, it's a long time fantasy that I've had, and probably a lot of writers and readers have had, of owning a bookshop. And so I'd always wanted to write that storyline. And then this one kind of came to me because I usually try to give the main character of the book a job that I'd love to have. And this actually is my favorite moment in the life cycle of a book, because I've done my work, my editor's done her work, the publisher has. They made, I hope, what is, a beautiful package for the book. Do you like the cover?
I love the cover. I love it. It's amazing.
Well, it was a long journey to get to it. You wouldn't believe the different looks that we went through. We had the streets of San Francisco, and we had crazy birds flying and feathers and things like that. And so by the time we got to this look, it was such a good moment, because I think it was the first time everybody who saw it agreed that, this looks like the kind of book that, will look yummy to readers. And sorry, this is my description this morning. This is Lenny, and he's actually from Salinas, California, from a shelter there. So he's like all over me because he knows I'm ignoring him right now. Yeah. Anyway, so he's my canine companion while I write. But no, anyway, this one came to me, also was inspired by my mom, who is elderly, and she now lives with us, and she has early dementia. And there was a character in the book who also has it, and presents a lot of tender moments, but also many loving challenges to his granddaughter, Natalie, who's not only in charge of him, but in charge of this struggling bookstore in the historic district of San Francisco, and the ins and outs of that. I'm glad you mentioned Trevor Dashwood, the one of the love interests.
Yeah.
He has a clearly made up name and a clearly made up bio, and he's kind of a fantasy figure now. I think if I was a bookseller, I would fantasize about, one of the world's best-selling authors coming to my shop, and and it turns out, he's more than what he seems, and very different, and as in many stories that I love, that the answer to all your, all your problems is right in front of you, but you don't see it until you've made this journey.
Interesting. Yes, it was one of many twists that I felt like kept coming unexpectedly. I guess that's what makes it a twist. I mean, obviously, but anyway, I didn't see some of these things, even though you say it's right in front of you. I was like taken right along with everyone else reading it, which is funny. So you've always wanted to, so one of the things that was so great about the book is how you referenced all these books that are actual books, right? I was just mentioning this before. It was so funny to read books that even came out last year, like Mrs. Everything by Jennifer Weiner. I'm like, that just came out and now here it is.
I remember when I included that because I was reading it and I thought, this is fantastic. I want everybody to read this book. And then I thought, well, if I was a bookseller, this would be what was so fun about it, is to be a book evangelist and to put the book in the hands of the reader who's most likely to read and enjoy it. And so that was kind of a little fun shout out about books that I've loved, writers that I like. There are a couple that were made up, and a couple of kind of insidery books, like the book that she reads that her mother had left on the nightstand. I guess it's not a spoiler to say that she inherits the bookshop and the ailing granddad from her mom, and the mom left. I won't say how, but quite suddenly and shockingly. And the first thing that she does is she looks at, well, not one of the first things she does. She looks at the stack of books on Mom's nightstand, and it pretty much reflected the stack of books on my nightstand. And so some of those books are early drafts of books that I've written and appeared in another form. So I enjoyed doing that as well. But yes, a lot of the authors are friends of mine. There's one scene in a bar that's a fantasy. This is another fantasy of mine, to have a library bar. And
I was concerned you were going to say the fantasy was having a bordello. So I'm glad we went a different way with that one.
How about a book bordello, where you help yourself to a book and have a drink. Yeah, but the library, all the cocktail recipes were named after Bay Area authors that I've either known and liked or not known, but I like their books. So that was fun as well. And shout out to Gail Tsukiyama. She has a book out on the same day as I do from the same publisher, a different imprint, and her book is called The Color of Air. And it's kind of a family saga about a guy who goes back to Hawaii. Anyway, read The Color of Air. That's the one that I'm reading right now. Oh, so, yes.
So one thing that unites some of the books that you've written is your interest in what happens to an ordinary person when something extraordinary happens. I think I read that somewhere. Anyway, what do you think it is that interests you about that moment? Because it is such a pivotal point in people's life, right? You just go about your life and everything is the same, and then 1 minute everything is different. And you love examining that intersection of sort of past and present. Tell me a little bit about your attraction to that time in people's lives.
I do. There's a writing memoir that Stephen King wrote, the author Stephen King, called On Writing. And somewhere in that book he says that the typical writer comes back to the same theme over and over again. And for me, it's usually the healing power of love and family. But also, I'm so attracted to I think most people don't wake up in the morning and feel like a hero, even though we need to be the hero of our own story. And so I'm very attracted to a storyline where a person is just going along in their life and some challenge just appears before her. And that's certainly the case with Natalie. She's created this very safe, predictable, steady, secure life that did not feel like her chaotic childhood, and that gets turned upside down in a moment. And the drama of that, and to send somebody reeling with that is something that really drives the narrative for me as a writer, and is something that I love as a reader too. So so that one was that was kind of a no-brainer for me, because the last thing that I want to read about is somebody who's satisfied with their life and she goes along and everything's fine. We want real life to work like that, but not fiction.
I feel like now is an example of this, that we're all sort of ordinary people where something extraordinary has happened to all of us, with the complete, grinding to a halt of modern society.
Oh my gosh, yes. We all have these pandemic moments where we realize that something is just not happening. And when a book gets published, typically the first thing we do is we go out on a book tour. The publisher lines up book signings and visits and library lectures, and you get to go out and promote your book and meet readers. And they had this really interesting book tour lined up for the Lost and Found Bookshop, where I was going to go from independent bookstore to independent bookstore and talk about book selling and what that is like today. And talk about in a moment, I got an email that said nobody's scheduling anything for July. Early on we thought, oh, maybe summer will be back to normal. No, we quickly realized. And so this is my book tour. So thank you so much for, hosting me and letting me still talk about my book and talk to readers. And thank you to people who are joining us and waving and shout outs. Nope. I appreciate it so much.
And I'll make this a podcast too, so a lot more people can listen to it that way.
I love podcasts and I love audiobooks. I just got the audiobook to listen to. That's the only way that I ever reread my books. After they're published, I tend to, I'll read sections of it, but I don't see myself sitting down and reading it cover to cover, because it would kind of make me mental, because I'd want to, I don't know, tweak it or something. But when I listen to the audiobook, it's such a different dimension, and it just adds so much. So I'm going to, it's a long book, so I'm probably going to walk to Chicago before I listen to it all. But anyway, yeah, so the audiobook version just released as well. And so audiobooks and podcasts have kept me company in many ways through this.
I always feel an even deeper connection when I listen to someone's audiobook, particularly like if it's a memoir and the author reads it themselves. I feel like we are full on friends by the time I finish listening, but they don't even know me yet. But there's an intimacy to listening, and I think I don't know, podcasts, audiobooks, all of it. I don't know. I think it helps any way we can get the message to people, even if it's not through a bookstore. But I really miss bookstores right now. I went back to one twice, I guess. But there's something so special about bookstores that can't be replicated. And it's not just about the shopping. I've spent some time trying to figure out why I feel so comfortable and at home and happy and like fulfilled when I walk into a bookstore. Someone was sort of making fun of a picture I posted on Instagram, like, how could you possibly be that joyful around books? And I'm like, I don't know, but I really legitimately feel joy, like surrounded by books and in a bookstore. Like, what do you think it is about bookstores that just fills us? Like, I don't know. What do you think it is?
Well, there's actually that reminds me, I'm not going to, I don't know the quote exactly, but I wrote a paragraph about that with Natalie's feeling of being in a bookstore is that people between the covers are still living their lives, and all you have to do, to bring them back to life is to open the covers. And so if you look around, it's such a feast for the eyes and the brain and everything. And there's something really enticing about browsing through the shelves and looking at the tables. And so I tried to include scenes that have always resonated with me. The reader who comes in, who, thinks she wants a serious book to impress her book club, and she ends up, walking away with a Jennifer Weiner book, and things like that. So I tried to include that. I also included a writer who should be very familiar to readers. Her name's Quill Ransom, and she's a nice lady, and people love her books, and she's everybody's mother's favorite author. And she's very excited. Her book is coming out, and the bookseller, organizes this lovely book signing, and then it's a horrible day and nobody comes. because I thought I should show that side of it as well, and how that can still have a good outcome, which it does for this nice lady author.
Yes. But I must say, you don't make it seem easy to run a bookstore. I mean, the debt and the building and the inventory, and you made many references in the book about obviously digital books and digital booksellers, and I mean, it's not easy. I mean, I don't know. I do everything I can to help, promoting them and shopping even on bookshop.org and having my little storefront, but like, how can we make sure that these gems don't leave? I'm like so nervous that after this pandemic we're gonna walk back into different neighborhoods and all my favorite stores are gonna be gone.
I agree. I totally agree. And that's another thing that came into sharp focus with the pandemic. I had a book out last year called The Oysterville Sewing Circle, and it did quite well, and it resonated with readers. And then what happened at the end of February when everything shut down, it came out in paperback and became a bestseller on the New York Times. And I was kind of shocked that that happened. And so somebody at my publisher pointed out, all the bookstores closed, but all the essential stores like the Walmarts and the Targets and the Costco's got to stay open. And those are the ones that sell the rack size paperback. And so the Oysterville book was out in rack size paperback. And so that was something that was still able to sell when the bookstores closed. And then, I started thinking, if I'm an independent bookseller, what do I do now? And so they were so creative. I'm so impressed by some of the initiatives they took, the online presence and the curbside delivery. And so we still got to support them that way. And thank you for bringing up bookshop.org. This is a way for people who are listening to shop at independent bookstores anywhere. Even if there's not one in your community, you can still buy from that, and it benefits independent bookstores. And so I'm very happy to be able to give them a shout out too. That one, I believe that actually came into being because of the pandemic. And so I'm kind of excited that it's become such a thing in bookselling now.
It started before, because I had a call with them before this all happened. I remember I was out in California. I was like, this is such a great idea. A friend of mine had told me about it, but then they just happened to be like in the perfect position. I mean, not to say anybody should benefit, but they were in a position to help when the pandemic did start, and they had just gotten, you can like watch as their profits have grown. Anyway, it's a great outlet. But
that's amazing. And yeah, bookstores and libraries are the ones that kind of keep the culture in our communities and in our minds. And so I'm just so grateful to be able to walk into a bookstore and find my book. I'd also like to give a shout out to a fellow author. Her name's Suzanne Salfers. She opened a bookstore. She took over an established bookstore on February 1st. And so the timing could not have been worse for, launching a new business. And that was actually going to be a stop on my book tour that suddenly turned virtual. And so one thing that readers can do, they can go to my website, susanwiggs.com, and the events page will list all the virtual events that I have. And so, yeah, please look for Suzanne and me too. We do what we can with these indie bookstores, and I think they're doing okay. I hope they are.
Good. Yeah. One of the things that I thought was so funny in your book was how when Natalie was debating sort of between, what type of guy as one of the negatives about someone, she talked about how he wasn't a book person and how that like filled her with anxiety. And was that fair of her or not? I thought that was so funny.
Well, one of the first conversations that I had with Jerry, who eventually became my husband, was about the fact that he was reading one of my books. And he was not only reading it, he would email me questions about it. And so, so I could see that he was really into it. And that's a question, can you be with somebody who's a non-reader, who doesn't have your same, book DNA or book chromosome? I don't know. I think it would be challenging. It definitely was for Natalie, because, even though she had, issues with the way that she grew up, in an apartment up over a struggling bookstore, she still is very much a book person.
Yes. The one other thing I just wanted to bring up is during the period of sort of loss and grief, you talked about how this whole trend towards celebrating a life, right? When someone passes away and we have a celebration for their life, but how the people who love them most don't feel like celebrating at all. They feel like the opposite and not even wanting to go on some of the time. Tell me a little bit about that. And then I was wondering, like, did that come from a personal place? Did you have a loss where you felt something similar?
Yeah, there's a lot of personal things. They've been transmuted into a more dramatic and exciting journey than I've had. But I did lose my elderly dad. He died with Parkinson's, and one of the things that I've always kept with me is the way we as a family made his exit happen for us and dealt with our grief. And one of the things was we had a giant party. And it was a memorial, and we all said our pieces, but we were wearing party dresses. We were drinking champagne. We were, sitting on the patio and reminiscing and telling stories at the church and everything. And so the memorial celebration that takes place in the book, a lot of that came from my memories of those days. And I wanted to, unfortunately, she was very traumatized by the whole situation, but I wanted her to find a way out. And I think the way that she journeyed through that transition was a reflection of the way that I kind of did the same thing. And those scenes and conversations, they were really emotional for me to write, and I hope for readers to read. And another reason that I love having a book out now is that everybody who reads a different book. You're going to read it and bring your creativity and your life experience and your lived experiences into the story in a unique way. And so I can publish one book, but everybody who reads it will read a different book. And so that storyline, it's unfortunately nobody makes it out of this alive. And so I think it's the way that we manage the journey through those transitions is key to, the way that we manage our lives and our love.
Well, I'm really glad you took your experience and put it in there, because I know many people, including myself, have felt the same way about different losses. So it's always great to have perspective and share in that feeling, even though it's, inevitable. I think that the shared experience is something that books do such a great job of doing, is making all of us feel less alone in the things that happen. But
single parenthood was the other kind of personal trope that I brought in. And so probably my favorite character is Dorothy. She's got a single dad, and their relationship was, it came entirely out of my imagination. I've never been a single dad, but I tried to include some of the challenges and some of the rewards of that too, because one thing that people, I think, overlook, in conversations about single parenthood are the rewards of it. Suddenly you're the one, you're on deck, and your relationship is going to be different because it's two in the world, not two parents. And I really wanted to explore that in the book, and hopefully, readers will have some feelings about that and share that aspect of it too.
Yeah, that was another great part. I'm telling you, there was so much in this book. You obviously know this, but you touched on so many different themes. It was very satisfying in that way. I know some of your other books have been adapted or are being adapted for film and TV, and I was just wondering, here, I should put this, maybe I should put this up so people can see it.
Thank you.
What's that? Oh, see, I should have done that all along. Anyway, do you have plans to take this book to the screen as well?
Oh my gosh, every book. That's another, fantasy of mine, is to see it adapted for TV or for a movie. This one, I'm hopeful of this one. I have a film agent. I'm sure she's shopping it around to production companies. This one I feel like would really lend itself, because the setting is contained mostly in the bookstore. Most of the book takes place there, and in and around San Francisco. That would just be a bonus. I would love to see that. unfortunately, the author has very little to do or say, unless the author is Nicholas Sparks or somebody who, Stephen King, who gets to call their shots. But no, it's totally up to where this book lands in somebody's hands. And so I'm hopeful that somebody will see a spark there and try another medium. I would love to see that. I would even love to see like a bad movie made of one of my books. I'm just so fascinated by that process. It's not anything that I could participate in other than writing the book, but it's still, a fantasy of mine.
At least you've already you got some of the swag going already. I saw like your tote bags on Instagram, which by the way, I'm like dying to get one of those tote bags. Maybe I could mail you one of mine and you could mail me one of yours. I love with the book covers on it and everything.
I do. Yes, I do. Yeah, I actually have one and I've been dragging it around with me everywhere. And so there actually is a way for readers to get one if they buy a signed book from one of the independent bookstores that has it. It comes with a tote bag. So, and okay. I think they can find information on I think it's on my blog or my website. I'll make sure that it's up there prominently displayed and they can pick their indie bookstore of choice and get a cool tote bag as well.
Awesome. Do you have any advice for aspiring authors? You've written 50 plus books. I mean, how do you do it? What's the secret and what's your general advice for them?
I'm convinced that every other writer except me has the secret, but I wish that I had an easy formula for this, and I'm here to tell you it's not easy. If it was easy, a lot more of us would do it, I guess. But I will say that everybody has a story. Everybody has a story, and everybody has a voice. And the people who succeed, you have to define that for yourself. What is it? Is it just getting your story out, or is it getting your story published in a big way or a small way? But if you want, this is commercial publishing. I mean, it's big publishers, and all the writer has to do is write. Somebody else does all that. In order to start that process, first of all, anybody who wants to write is in luck, because you don't have to be, a certain age to do it. I started very, very young, but I know writers who didn't start writing until they retired from a job. And so you can start at any point in your life. And the key for me is, number one, start. Number two, finish what you start. And that's probably I know many, many writers who write 17 glorious pages and then they get distracted and it kind of peters out. You have to remind yourself to write, if not every day, on a regular schedule. When I first started, I was a mom, I was a teacher, I wrote during my lunch hour, I stayed up late at night, I tried to juggle that, and somehow I wrote 1 or 2 books a year that way. My youth, I guess, my frisky youth. But a writer needs to practice her craft. Some people say your apprenticeship is 1,000,000 words, which is about 10 books. In my case, I sold, I think, the 3rd book that I wrote. So be prepared to have some practice books and study your craft. I think you'll be able to. Oh, am I gone?
Nope, you're back.
Okay. Anyway, the way that I studied my craft is not only I practiced it every day, but I accessed the wisdom of other writers and other writing teachers. And I have my 2 favorites right here. I'm never far from them.
Okay.
And I will share them so people can, you're going to go online and find this one, probably from a second bookseller, because I don't know if it's in print, but it's called Techniques of the Selling Writer by Dwight Swain. And it was published by a small press. And this was my Bible when I was learning the craft of writing a novel. And then this one is called The Writer's Journey by Christopher Vogler. And it's actually a manual for screenwriters, which sounds weird, but everything that he says in here relates to the journey of a book. And so between those 2, when I would get stuck in a story and not know where the story should go and how the journey should be shaped, I would always go back to matters of craft, because there's inspiration and there's talent and nobody can give you that, but there is craft. Just like in any profession, there are certain steps that you can take and things that you can learn. And hopefully if you read The Lost and Found Bookshop, here's a matter of craft. Okay, this is a quick lesson. Pay attention to what Natalie wears in most of the key scenes. And it's subtle and you probably don't focus on it, but you find that the way she dresses, and I find this with women that I know in real life, reflects what she's trying to be and who she's trying to be and where she's trying to go in life. So in the very first scene, she's very buttoned down and corporate looking and, trying to be very professional. And the look that she adopts in, scene after scene, she tries to emulate her mother and look like her mother, and that doesn't work. And by the end, she kind of looks like us. She's in her yoga pants.
I got out of my workout pants for this.
Yeah,
so you know.
Thank you. Yeah, but she, but by the end, she's comfortable in her own skin, in her own identity, instead of trying to fit into a life that didn't fit her. And that one thing that I did as I was revising the book, I realized that her evolution as a character was not sharp enough. I went back to matters of craft and I remembered some of these lessons, and I thought, how do I show this in a subtle way without, hitting the reader over the head with it? And so maybe some readers will notice it, some won't, but that's a typical matter of craft. I didn't make it up. I brought my creativity to it, I hope, but that's just a quick little lesson that I remember from the book, and it's something that you develop by studying your craft.
Amazing. Can you give us a preview of your next book?
I would love to, because I'm supposed to be finishing it probably this week, but I'd much rather do podcasts. My working title, and by working title it means the title I'm using that I hope the publisher will keep, is American Princess. And weirdly, I started it all before before white privilege became a really big prominent issue in today's world. I was already writing about this woman who is she discovers that she's afflicted with white privilege and decides to make a huge change in her life because of it. And so it's called American Princess. It takes place in Greater Washington, D.C. And it's been amazing to write. And I actually, before the pandemic, like right before, in February of this year, I made a research trip to Vietnam. And it was a life-changing, magical trip that I made with a number of fellow travelers who I haven't seen since, because we got home and everything shut down. So that will be out next summer, 2021. This one is out now. The other thing I wanted to give a shout out to my publisher for, they created probably the nicest digital book club kit for this book. You can find it on my website. And it has the coolest things. It has like some trivia cards about bookstores, it has a coloring page, has a recipe. It's very cool. So if you have a book club or you want to, adopt something for your book club, I encourage people to check that out too.
Well, I think I might just print them out for my kids now.
Very cute.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. Congratulations on finishing your first Instagram Live. You made it.
Oh my God, this was fun. This was like way more fun. I don't even want to work now.
Me neither. No, I'm kidding. Well, this is great. Thank you for sharing your virtual book tour, making this a stop. I really appreciate it. And congratulations on your book. And I'm going to go online and now find a way to get myself one of those tote bags.
You are so welcome. Thank you again. And I hope everybody stays safe. Wear your mask. Don't touch your face. Read a book. Bye now.
Bye, Susan. Thank you.